I knew that we were faced with economic austerity, and then there was no money. High debt management was our debt burden was under. Our external reserves have been depleted. But what happened in the case, when I was campaigning, you were here, Jacob, I was campaigning on fixing the economy to work for everyone. If you don't get the economy and the surplus that you invest into social investment programs, then you're wrong. Now, what did we see? The public policy priority that this government brought was to talk about what? Free education. You don't have money, how do you give free? And therefore, as a typical economic thing, it's about national resource management. I will show the economic security agenda, which means reduce the threats of corruption, wasteful spending, and public policy priorities, especially public financial management. We have seen the Auditor General's report. We have also seen the Bureau Commission of Inquiry. The Bureau Commission of Inquiry, all those crisscross you are seeing now, you mentioned Isheko. You see politicians, they are predatory politicians. They predate from one political party to the other because they have accumulated unexplained wealth. Okay. And that unexplained wealth, reducing the threat and risk of corruption, wasteful spending, organized criminal act, are the fundamental problem of our economy. All right. The resources we get from the domestic revenue mobilized from the have been used for wasteful spending.
Thank you so much. He is Dr. Jonathan Msali, presidential candidate for the National Unity and Reconciliation Party. He has just been nominated. I still have in the studios the former PRO in the Western area for the NDC, who is Captain King. Now, Mr. King, you've defected to the APC, and elections are fast approaching. Do you think your defection, will kind of change anything? Will lead to something unique to the APC?
Indeed, we have a support base, each and every one of us. We have constituency chairman, secretary generals, all the stuff. We have a support base. As I say, we are the speedboat to bring APC to victory. Because in our team, we have strategies, we have experts. We have experts in identifying weaknesses in the APC party. We've been on the other side. We've been seeing their weaknesses. We are here to cover those weaknesses all over Sierra Leone. So I repeat again, we are the speedboat, to get APC to quick victory.
Well, before defecting to the APC, did you consult your membership? Because yes, I know you are the executive members, of the NGC, but politics in democracy, it is a number game, So, did you consult your membership before defecting?
Well, that's why I took time to decide. I don't make quick decisions. The chairman of the NDC, former chairman of the NDC party, and the national chairman and the regional chairman and other stakeholders resigned months ago, but I waited in order to consult family members, my supporters, and others in order to come to this decision. I'm really confident in this, my decision to come to the APC party. The APC party, of course, the All People's Congress is for everybody. All People's Congress. I've been preaching against tribalism, nepotism, and all the rest of it. But the founding fathers of APC, they are wise enough to call it APC because it's All People's Congress for all Sierra Leoneans. Yubimide, Timini, Limba, Creole, and my supporters, I have a wide range of supporters in different types, from different tribes, So Getting them over is simple. Same here, I've already convinced most of them, seeing me over Slbc. So I have confidence now.
All right, okay.
My support.
Thank you so much. He is a former PRO for the NGC in the Western area, Tapsil King. I still have in the chairman for the Citizens Democratic Party, who is Victor King. Now, Mr. King, let us know the CDP and your candidates, and then your political base. You know, do you have that national character as a party?
Yeah, of course, we have a national character, just like what Dr. Sandy said, and the law will not permit you if you don't have national character. You have to have your district, you have to have your regions, you have to have your ward, and you have to have all those executives all over the country. If you don't have that kind of structure, we will not allow you to exist as a political party. And we have done that. That is why we are included in the 14 political party that will be contesting the general elections. In terms of base, I don't really know what you are saying, but I believe Sierra Leone, for us, normally what people can say, the other political parties are coming from the southeast, other political parties are coming from the northwest and all those things, but I believe that we are more from the north, because there is the north is where our founding father is coming from, the late Joshua Albert Kelu. So I believe we have a base.
Okay, now going into these elections, you know, like this EPR system, the district block system, and have you been able to, you know, have you got candidates for all the districts, the regions, the entire country? Because if you have a national character, you must have, you know, candidates for councillors, members of parliament across the country.
Of course, you remember in our previous discussion, and I told you that we have prioritized the districts because this particular election is so costly. We cannot afford to put candidates in all of the districts, just like what Dr. Sandy said, that we are constrained, and then at some point the law is the law is not too favorable for all of us. At some point we think that is favorable maybe for the two bigger political parties.
All right, okay. Thank you so much. And he is Victor King, the chairman for the CDP, that is the Citizens Democratic Party. But I still have Abu Bakr, who is contesting as an independent candidate in the western area of. Now, Mr. Bakr, let us talk to, let us speak to the electorates, for that ones who are going to vote. You know, does your aspiration resonate, you know, with the people you want to, you know, represent in parliament?
Yes, the message is clear. Sierra Leoneans, Freetonians, Westerners, choose your parliamentarians wisely. Ask yourself the following questions. Does your parliamentarian aspirant understand policies and laws? Has he been doing critiquing in or out of governance space? Does your parliamentarian aspirant have integrity, sincerity? Does he have a track record of bringing new things, being innovative? Is he or she fearless? Is he sincere? Ask yourself those questions. The current parliament and the past parliament that have been keeping Auditor General's reports under the desk for years, even decades plus, without even analyzing them. There is no document in this country that is important as the Auditor General's document after the Constitution, because it is that document that audits all government institutions, ministries, departments and agencies, and see their loopholes where they've been wasting monies and where they've been stealing public money. So if you have a parliament that cannot discuss that, they rather prioritize discussing its welfare and demanding the state to pay them $50,000, which is in fact illegal, because the legal tender that is allowed to use in Sierra Leone is millions. But if Parliament can have the temerity and put their own welfare benefits in dollars, then I want to say Sierra Leoneans should think twice before they choose this type of people. This time around, let it not be for party, let it not be for self. let it be for Sierra Leone. Let's take back our country. Check my track record. If I don't have the integrity, if I don't have the sincerity, if I don't have the fearless nature, if I don't have the innovative ways of bringing new things, critiquing, don't vote for me. But if you check the track record and you see those unique attributes in me, make your decision and let's have a better Sierra Leone.
All right, thank you so much. And here is Abdul Bakar contesting for parliamentary seats in the Western Urban District as an independent candidate. That is how we say goodbye. Very thanks to you, Mr. King, from the NGC to from the ABC, and also Abdul contesting as an independent candidate and the presidential candidate for the National Unity and Reconciliation Party, Dr. Jonathan Sandi, and also to Mr. Victor Ken from the CDP. Well, that is how we say goodbye. It has been a good morning, Sierra Leone, which came to you live from the Sierra Leone Broadcasting Corporation. Many thanks to the entire production team, especially producer Daphne Kamara. I am Shekusma saying goodbye and have a splendid day.
Typhoid fever, also known as enteric fever, is a potentially fatal multisystemic illness caused primarily by Salmonella typhi and to a lesser extent by Salmonella paratyphi. With proper treatment, enteric fever yields a high cure rate. But untreated typhoid fever may progress to delirium, which is an abrupt change in the brain that causes mental confusion and emotional disruption. Intestinal obstruction, intestinal hemorrhage, bowel perforation, and death within 1 month of onset of the disease. Most common transmission method of typhoid fever is oral transmission via ingestion of contaminated food and beverages. These food handlers are often asymptomatic, and they chronically shed the bacteria through feces or, less commonly, urine. Due to poor personal hygiene of these people, food is often contaminated with bacteria. Bacteria can also be transmitted by drinking sewage-contaminated water and eating shellfish. And, neglecting hand hygiene after using a contaminated toilet is another method of transmission. Typhoid fever occurs worldwide, primarily in developing nations whose sanitary conditions are poor. Typhoid fever is endemic in Asia, Africa, Latin America and Caribbean, which are colored in red color on the map. Travelers who are traveling to these endemic countries are at high risk of developing typhoid fever. Typhoidal salmonella are able to survive a stomach pH as low as 1.5. Reduction in gastric acidity may increase the risk of developing typhoid fever. Antacids, proton pump inhibitors, H2 receptor blockers, gastrectomy and conditions like achlorohydria can cause reduction in gastric acidity and facilitate bacterial growth. And some people may possess genetic polymorphisms, which dampen the macrophage activity and facilitate bacterial growth. Now let's discuss about the pathophysiology of typhoid fever. All pathogenic Salmonella species, when present in the gut, are engulfed by phagocytic cells, which then pass through the mucosa and present them to the macrophages in lamina propria. Non-typhoidal salmonella are phagocytous throughout the distal ileum and colon. With toll-like receptors, macrophages recognize pathogen-associated molecular patterns such as flagella and lipopolysaccharides. Macrophages and intestinal epithelial cells then attract T cells and neutrophils with interleukin 8, causing inflammation and suppressing the infection. In contrast to non-typhoidal salmonella, Salmonella typhi and paratyphi enter the host system primarily through the distal ileum. They adhere to the epithelium over clusters of lymphoid tissue in the ileum, also known as Peyer's patches. They have specialized fimbriae to adhere to the epithelial cells. The bacteria are then phagocytized by the macrophages located in Peyer's patches. The bacteria then induce their host macrophages to attract more macrophages. Salmonella-containing macrophages then reach the mesenteric lymph nodes, thoracic duct and reticuloendothelial system, which consist of liver, spleen, bone marrow and associated lymph nodes. While traveling, bacteria use the macrophage cellular mechanisms for their own reproduction. Once a critical density of organisms reached, they induce macrophage apoptosis, breaking out into the bloodstream to invade rest of the body. The bacteria then infect the gallbladder via either bacteremia or direct extension of infected bile. The result is that the organism re-enters the gastrointestinal tract in bile and reinfects Peyer's patches. Bacteria that do not reinfect the host are typically shed in the stools and are then available to infect other hosts. Now I'm going to discuss about the signs and symptoms of classic typhoid fever. The clinical syndromes associated with Salmonella typhi and paratyphi are indistinguishable. Thus, both organisms generate a similar type of clinical presentation. Signs and symptoms usually appear after 7 to 14 days of ingestion of the bacteria. Fever pattern is stepwise, characterized by rising temperature over the course of each day that drops by the subsequent morning. The peaks and troughs rise progressively over time. Relative bradycardia and reduced pulse pressure can also be observed. Over the course of the first week of illness, the notorious gastrointestinal manifestations develop. These include diffuse abdominal pain and tenderness, and in some cases, fierce right upper quadrant pain. Monocytic infiltration causes inflammation of Peyer's patches. This may lead to narrowing of bowel lumen, causing constipation that lasts the duration of the illness. In addition, the patient may present with a dry cough, dull frontal headache, delirium, and malaise. At the end of the first week of illness, fever plateaus at around 39 to 40 degrees Celsius. The patient develops rose spots, which are salmon-colored and 1 to 4 centimeters in size. These generally resolve within 2 to 5 days. During the second week of illness, the signs and symptoms listed above progress. Abdomen becomes distended, and splenomegaly is common. Relative bradycardia and necrotic pulse may develop. In the third week, the individual grows more toxic and anorexic with significant weight loss. The conjunctiva are infected, and the patient is tachypnic with a thready pulse and crackles over the lung bases. Abdominal distension is severe. Some patients experience foul, green-yellow, liquid diarrhea, also known as pea soup diarrhea. Inflammation due to the necrosis of Peyer's patches may cause bowel perforation and peritonitis. At this point, overwhelming toxemia, myocarditis or intestinal hemorrhage may cause death. If the individual survives to the fourth week, fever, mental confusion and abdominal distension increases over the next few days. Intestinal and neurologic manifestations may still occur. Weight loss and weakness increases. Some survivors become asymptomatic salmonella carriers and have the potential to transmit the disease to other people. The clinical course of a given individual may deviate from the above description of classic disease. The signs and symptoms may vary depending on the geographic region, race factors and the infecting bacterial species. The stepladder fever pattern that was once the hallmark of typhoid fever now occurs only about 12% of all cases. In most recent cases, the fever has a steady, insidious onset. Young children, individuals with AIDS, and 1/3 of immunocompetent adults with typhoid fever develop diarrhea rather than constipation. Now let's discuss about the complications of typhoid fever. As it is a multisystemic illness, it affects almost all the organ systems in the body. Potential neuropsychiatric manifestations include the following. A toxic confusional state characterized by disorientation, delirium and restlessness. Facial twitching and convulsions. Obtundation and coma indicate severe disease. In rare cases, transverse myelitis, clinical mononeuropathy and polyneuropathy may occur. Spastic paraplegia, peripheral cranial neuritis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, and depression are some other rare complications. Respiratory complications may include acute lobar pneumonia and ulceration of the posterior pharynx. Cardiovascular complications may include toxic myocarditis in about 1 to 5% of patients. This is the leading cause of death in endemic areas. And rarely, the patient may develop pericarditis. Hepatobiliary complications may include jaundice, pancreatitis and hepatomegaly. Intestinal manifestations include intestinal hemorrhage and perforation. Genitourinary manifestations include immune complex glomerulitis, proteinuria, and rarely, nephritic syndrome. Hematologic manifestations include disseminated intravascular coagulation and rarely, hemolytic uremic syndrome. The diagnosis of typhoid fever is primarily clinical, based on history and signs and symptoms. The doctor should obtain a travel history from the patient. In addition, culture of the organism should perform to confirm the diagnosis and test antibiotic sensitivity. Culture of the organism is considered 100% specific. blood, intestinal secretions, and feces can be used to isolate the organism. Now let's discuss about possible treatment options for typhoid fever. Untreated typhoid fever carries about 15 to 30% of mortality rate. However, with proper treatment, the mortality rate of typhoid fever is less than 1%. Carefully consider empiric treatment options. Most Salmonella typhi and Paratyphi strains are not susceptible to fluoroquinolones. Thus, fluoroquinolones should not be included in empiric treatment. As CDC indicates, azithromycin for suspected uncomplicated disease and third-generation cephalosporins for severe or complicated disease are given. People who traveled to Pakistan are treated with different antibiotics. Azithromycin for uncomplicated disease and carbapenems for severe or complicated disease. Finally, let's come to the prevention of typhoid fever. Maintaining of good personal hygiene is a good way of prevention of typhoid fever. Vaccination is recommended for travelers to parts of the world where typhoid fever is common, people who live in endemic areas, and laboratory workers who work with Salmonella typhi bacteria. There are 2 vaccines are available for typhoid fever: inactivated 1 and live attenuated 1. Inactivated vaccine is given as an intravenous injection and given to people of 2 years and older. A single-dose vaccine, given 2 weeks before travel. Repeated doses are recommended every 2 years for people who remain at risk. Live attenuated vaccine is given orally as a capsule and given to people of 6 years and older.
A place cannot produce poems. It can only not prevent them. And Freetown is good at that, for Freetown has its own sudden elegances. People are slow to leave it, quick to return. And there are others who come for a year or 2 and stay for a lifetime, sensing that they found a city that is in the world, yet sufficiently on the edge of it to have a different resonance. Let me tell you something about this city. All of us, we're all just passing through, and we've all been here forever. Those who came, those who stayed, those who never returned. Tides turn, seasons change, we've waited and we've watched. But we've always been here. We've always listened, because there is a different resonance here. It comes from the river, and the land, and the sky.
It's our place. All of us.
This city belongs to everyone.
And you know when it's your time.
And it's our time.
Listen, we are Freetown.
We are Freetown!
The golden rules of Freetown.
Don't pretend you're something that you're not.
Don't go thinking you're better than anyone else.
Or that anyone else is better than you.
Don't shout about it. Get on with it.
We are Freetown.
Freetown.
Freetown. Yeah.
We found our voice again.
I'm from India and Freetown.
I'm from China and Freetown.
I'm from the UK and Freetown.
I am from Nigeria and Freetown.
I am from home and Freetown.
This city belongs to everyone.
The fisherman,
the taxi driver,
the barber,
the drummers, the dancers.
All of us.
All of us. Everybody. We are Freetown.
The past is ours.
The future is ours. It's our time again.
And this city belongs to everyone.
The playwright,
the greengrocer,
the teacher,
the dog.
This space is ours.
This light is ours.
The beaches are ours.
The rivers, now we own.
The roads are ours.
The bridges, now we own.
We are Freetown.
We are all visitors and we've all been here forever.
We've got the mightiest river.
And the biggest sky.
And there's a resonance again.
Freetown. Freetown. We are proud of this place.
We love this city.
And we want you to love it too.
We are proud of this place.
Na pass we all dey pass like stranger dem, but we all don't dare from them. Come here, and you'll feel it, that end of the line sense of freedom. Say yes to Freetown. Say yes to freedom.
Opinion polls here are not always reliable, but the possibility of President Erdogan losing the election on May 14 is no longer unthinkable. But he still has high levels of support, especially among religious and more conservative voters. If no candidate secures an outright majority, then a second round will be held later this month. Sinem Kösoğlu, Al Jazeera, Istanbul.
Well, let's cross to a Sinem in Istanbul now. And as you mentioned in your story there, this is an incredibly close election. Can you just give us a sense of what it's like on the streets in the lead up?
Well, Tom, in the streets, it's a little bit tense actually, because people are feeling bored, people are feeling stressed, and now Turkey is divided into two blocks. One, the government parties bloc, which is called the presidential election, and the opposition bloc of 6 parties. And there are no ideologies in these blocks. Just to win the elections, parties have gathered to win the opponent part. But I must say that it is a little bit tense, because when we were doing street interviews, people were quarreling with each other. It is easy for people to call each other names, especially since the country has been polarized after the failed coup attempt in July 2016. I'm in Istanbul's Beşiktaş district. This is one of the opposition strongholds in terms of mayoral elections. And each party has a booth here. They are trying to introduce their candidates to the public. They are playing music, but all polls suggest everything is neck and neck. So this is going to be a very tight battle, and all parties are doing best to win the May 14 election.
Can you just give us a sense of who the candidates are and exactly what they are offering and what, I guess, differences they have?
Well, we have 4 presidential candidates in this election, and on May 14, Turkey is not only select its president, but also its member of the parliaments. And the leading candidate is, of course, the current president, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and the main opposition leader, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, representing 6 other opposition groups, seems to be actually receiving more votes than President Erdogan, according to the polls so far. And there are 2 more candidates who are Muharrem İnce, who was also a presidential candidate in the previous presidential election, and he did quite well. And there is Sinan Oğan. He's representing the nationalist bloc. He's a professor, but for now it seems like a battle between Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, opposition leader, and President Erdogan. And Kılıçdaroğlu says he's going to clean the house and he's going to bring investment to Turkey. He's going to bring freedom, media freedom, and everything is going to be good, as per his saying. But on the other side, Turkish president represents the statesman side. He says, I have done lots of industrial developments in this country, and he actually promotes what his governing party has done so far in the last 20 years. Basically, it's basically the economic crisis had dented Turkish president's popularity in the last couple of years. That's why many people are complaining about inflation. That's why the opposition is using this rhetoric in a good way. So it seems people are going to vote for the situation, for the supplies in their kitchen, but everything is full of surprises, and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has really high support despite all the inflation and all the high living costs in Turkey.
Okay, thank you so much for that. That is Sinem Kosioglu in Istanbul for us. Well, China has expelled Canada's top diplomat in Shanghai in what it is calling a countermeasure. Earlier on Monday, Canada expelled a Chinese diplomat accused of intimidating a Canadian politician of Chinese origin. The diplomat gathered information on Michael Chong and his relatives in Hong Kong, according to Canada's spy agency. Chong had been critical of Beijing's treatment of Uyghur Muslims. Well, Chong is a member of Canada's main opposition Conservative Party. He is accusing the government of taking too long to react.
It shouldn't have taken 2 years for the government to make this decision when they became aware that members and their families of the House of Commons were being targeted by the PRC and by persons in Canada accredited by the Government of Canada as diplomats in Canada. Security experts have been telling us for years that there isn't one single tool to combat foreign interference threat activities here on Canadian soil. Expelling diplomats who are engaged in those activities is but one tool. There are other tools that need to be put in place.
Well, Jessica Washington is in Beijing with more.
We heard from a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry very much reiterating the messages that we heard earlier. Let me just read a short portion of what he said, that the expulsion of the Canadian diplomat was justified and necessary, and China's determination to protect its legitimate interests will not waver. He once again reiterated the point that China will never interfere in internal affairs of other countries, and that diplomats always perform their duties in accordance with the law, and he urged Canada to stop unreasonable provocations and warned that there could be potential consequences if they don't. Now, the actions that we've seen on the part of Beijing are certainly what we expected when we heard that there would be the expulsion of a Chinese diplomat from Canada. Canada's intelligence reports, which some have been leaked to the media, which seem to indicate some interference on the part of Beijing in Canada's democratic processes, including its elections. Beijing always firmly denies any interference in any country's internal affairs. So certainly a relationship that is tense, and what we've seen in this latest incident, the statement from the Foreign Ministry, that last comment's particularly interesting, that Beijing reserves the right to further react to this incident. So we can expect some additional retaliation.
Well, let's return to our story on the fighting in Sudan. Heber Morgan joins us now from Khartoum, and as the talks continue in Jeddah, so too does the fighting.
Yes, indeed. Now, there were several airstrikes around the vicinity of the presidential palace in the center of Khartoum, and we were able to see plumes of smoke rising from around the presidential palace. There were also heavy artillery heard from various parts of the capital in the eastern side of the capital, Khartoum. In the northern part of the capital, when we spoke to residents, they say that today has been relatively quiet, but that there are a lot of rapid support forces troops in the city of Bahri, so they are concerned that there will be more attacks from the Sudanese army and the Sudanese army fighter jets in the coming hours. Now, the humanitarian situation, because of the fighting, is getting more and more dire every single day. We spoke to medics who say that the situation at hospitals is very, very critical, that they're out of medications for many patients, that they can only treat people who have wounds from gunshot wounds or stabs, but people with chronic and life-threatening diseases cannot be treated. They also said that they need surgical kits and that they're having to recycle what they have. This is, of course, in addition to the conditions that people are suffering at home, where people say that they've been without food and water for days in many parts of the capital, Khartoum.
Okay, thank you so much for that update. That is Heber Morgan for us in Khartoum. Well, it's time for sport now. Here's Sana.
Thank you very much, Tom. Well, two of world football's biggest teams go head-to-head in the European Champions League later this Tuesday. Title holders Real Madrid are up against Manchester City in the semi-finals. The first leg of this tie is being played in Madrid. The teams met at this stage of the competition last year. City led 5-3 on aggregate with just seconds to go in the second leg. But Real were still able to produce an incredible comeback to win the tie and went on to beat Liverpool in the final. City have never won this title. Real have won European football's biggest prize, a record 14 times.
What happened in the past. We are not here for a revenge. It's just another opportunity. As much we are here, one day we'll get it. One day we'll reach the final and we will win it. We come here to do this season.
It's clear that they have the goal to win the Champions League. I think most of the players they have never did, so it's normal that you are, it's nearly impossible to be more motivated, and you felt it also last year.
I have the philosophy, and I think all my teammates have the philosophy that you can always learn about the past experiences. We did a great 2 games, but at the end football was like this. We didn't go through, but we are here again to fight again.
And for more on this, let's talk now to Spanish sports broadcaster Gemma Soler. Gemma, what impact will last year's semi-final have on this year's meeting between the two teams?
Oh, well, it will have a big impact because, as you mentioned, it's the same two teams, the same stage, the same venue, the Santiago Bernabeu. So we're talking about one of the most shocking comebacks in recent history of football. So every actor remembers that game. And it's curious because both coaches in the press conference yesterday, they mentioned that they will sign what happened last year. Of course, Ancelotti will sign the result, and Pep Guardiola will sign for the 175 minutes that his team dominated Real Madrid, and after this crazy 5 minutes that ended up with that comeback of Real Madrid being in the final. So, as I was mentioning, it will have a big impact. Man City looking for revenge or an opportunity, as Guardiola mentioned it, and especially not making the same mistakes. And as for Real Madrid, they want the challenge to repeat what they achieved. Doing that in the second leg at Etihad Stadium, the fact that not being favorites on paper, but proving why they are the champions of Europe for 14 times.
Of course, Gemma, one player City did not have a year ago is Erling Haaland. How close was Haaland to becoming a Real Madrid player last summer?
If we talk specifically about last summer, he was not as close as reports suggest, because Real Madrid were really looking for Kylian Mbappe, and they were very close of achieving that shiny signing. So if we specifically talk about only last summer, he wasn't that close. But Real Madrid have been monitoring Erling Haaland for a long time. Actually, in 2017, they thought about signing that really young, excellent forward, but they have just signed Vinicius, and they were targeting Rodrigo as well. So they decided to wait and see how did this Norwegian forward evolve. And then when they really tried, it was not possible for them just before moving to Borussia Dortmund, and this is because Real Madrid president Florentino Perez didn't have the best relationship with his former agent Mino Raiola, and his father, Erling Haaland's father, wanted his son to cover all the stages before going to a top team. And now, of course, they know that with money they cannot compete with a team like Manchester City, but they still don't forget the thing about signing him someday, because he has said that he would like to play in Spain. He really loves Spain, Marbella, and he probably wants to take experience in La Liga. So they don't forget about Erling Haaland in the future.
Spanish sports broadcaster Gemma Soler, thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
Lionel Messi may have been suspended by his club team, but the Argentina captain is still picking up awards. Messi and his World Cup winning Argentina team won prizes at the Laureus World Sports Awards in Paris. 35-year-old is being punished by PSG for making an unsanctioned trip to Saudi Arabia. The Laureus Awards are voted for by a panel of former sporting stars. And Jamaican sprint champion Shelly Ann Fraser-Price finally won the Sportswoman of the Year award. Fraser-Price is a three-time Olympic gold medalist and reigning 100 meters world champion. LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers have pushed the Golden State Warriors to the brink of elimination in the NBA playoffs. Steph Curry and the Warriors looked on course to win Game 4 of this series, but a fourth-quarter comeback led by Lonnie Walker saw the Lakers securing a 104-101 victory. They're now 3-1 up in this best-of-7 Western Conference semifinal. And Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo combined to score 50 points for the Miami Heat in their Game 4 win over the New York Knicks. The Heat are also 3-1 up in that series. And that's all your sport for me. I hand you back to Tom.
Thank you so much, Sana. Well, that's all from me for this news hour, but Laura Kyle will be here in just a moment with more of the day's news.
Jump into the stream.
10% of the population globally is responsible for about 50% of carbon emissions.
Join the debate.
People have already lost their lives. People have lost their cultures. People have lost their traditions.
Have your say.
I want to broaden this conversation by bringing more voices into it. Live on YouTube, people commenting.
I want the whole world to know that refugees are not terrorists. Refugees always resist with the power that they have.
The Stream on Al Jazeera.
Cheers from school children in the island community of East End. The excitement is over the arrival of their teacher, Francisco Velasquez. There's only one school on Cayos Cochinos, and Francisco is the only teacher.
The fact that these children are able to have an education at all is the result of years of hard work from the local community here in Cayos Cochinos.
At the start of this year, the U.S. government announced $33 million to increase access to education, part of a broader strategy by the Biden administration to address the root causes of migration from Central America. Critics in Honduras, however, warn that rampant government corruption means that foreign assistance too often goes astray.
Pro-democracy activists risking their lives fighting autocracy.
I know that I might go to prison, so I will join the rally.
Democracy Maybe explores the struggle of those who believe democracy is worth dying for.
We never know when an opening is going to come, when a fruit vendor is going to immolate himself and say, enough is enough.
My Life for Democracy on Al Jazeera.
Former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan is arrested as he appears in court to face corruption charges. Hello there, I'm Laura Kyle. This is Al Jazeera Live from Doha. Also coming up. Anger in Gaza after Israeli airstrikes killed 13 Palestinians, including 3 members of Islamic Jihad. Plus explosions and gunshots in the occupied West Bank as Israeli forces raid the city of Nablus. Also ahead. Russia's president says Ukraine has become a hostage to Western ambitions as Moscow celebrates Victory Day in the shadow of war. begin with breaking news out of Pakistan. Former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been arrested by police, backed by paramilitary officers at a court in the capital, Islamabad. Khan, who was ousted as leader a year ago, is facing dozens of charges, including corruption and terrorism, all of which, he says, are politically motivated. Let's speak to Kamal Haider now. He joins us live from the Pakistani capital, Islamabad. Has this arrest at this time, Kamal, come as a shock?
Not just the way, the time of the arrest, but the way of the arrest, because Imran Khan had already gone into the court premises. He was inside the court premises when those Rangers units, which is a part of the Pakistani military, but under the jurisdiction of the Interior Ministry, broke the windows, entered into that room, then picked up Imran Khan. His lawyer said that they were pepper sprayed, that the former Prime Minister was kicked and also hit on the head. And then he was taken away from inside the court premises, which then prompted the Chief Justice of the Islamabad High Court to say as to how he could have been arrested from inside the jurisdiction of that court. Now, he then called the Inspector General and said he should appear within 15 minutes. The Inspector General was late. However, the Inspector General said that it was not the police who arrested him, but the paramilitary forces who were aiding the National Accountability Bureau that arrested him. The Islamabad High Court Chief Justice also summoned the Secretary Interior within 15 minutes. He has not turned up yet. The court also disturbed about that. Imran Khan, according to the latest reports, has been taken away by the National Accountability Bureau to their premises, and there he will be given a medical examination with 8 doctors on board. But however, as the reports of Imran Khan's arrest went across the country, protesters are already on the streets, arrests are being made. The Inspector General Police of Islamabad is saying that anybody coming out to protest should be arrested. So indeed, a precarious situation developing after the arrest of the former Prime Minister.
Absolutely, because do provide us with a little bit of context, a little bit of background, because there have been arrest attempts in the past which have been prevented by Imran Khan's supporters.
Well, in fact, it did not just prevented by Imran Khan's supporters, but also backed up by the courts, because the courts were granting him bail. There were incidents earlier outside his residence in which the protesters tried to stop the police from arresting Imran Khan because he already had bail. Now, he's got over 140 cases against him. This new case, which the National Accountability Bureau says pertains to some fraud in some university that was done in the past. However, Imran Khan's lawyers say they did not receive any notices in this regard. And also the fact that Imran Khan has been cooperating with the courts despite the threat to his life. There was an assassination attempt on him several months ago. He has been coming under heavy body protective armor with his close bodyguards along with him to the courts, and has said that there's been at least another attempt to try to assassinate him when he last appeared in the judicial complex. So indeed, a precarious situation, also exacerbated by the fact that the government in power has already said that they will not be holding those elections, which the Supreme Court says have to be held within 90 days. That deadline is going to pass soon. But what will be important to see is how the people react to this latest arrest.
Absolutely. We'll be keeping a very close eye on events as they unfold there in Pakistan. Kamal Haider, for the moment, thanks very much. Well, Imran Khan's spokesman has told Al Jazeera that this arrest is unlawful and that his supporters are responding accordingly.
Chairman Khan has been sort of talking about the prospect of his arrest, for a number of days. And even this morning, before leaving for Islamabad, he recorded a video message, in which he said that he would most likely be arrested again. And this, in fact, every time he appeared in a court of law, his followers, were afraid that he would be taken in. And I think attempts were made in the past, but because of various factors, he was not arrested. But today, it was a blatant interference in the judicial affairs by the powers that be, and he was taken in. Let's see what the reaction is going to be. But this is in violation of all laws and rules contained in the statute book, and I think the Rangers were the force, that took him in, and we understand, that they're not directly controlled by the government in power. They are controlled by other forces, which are considered to be above the law in this country. I understand, that in certain cities, large number of people are already gathering, and they are going to, understandably, they're going to block the cities. So I think that will happen, and this is going to catch up, as time progresses, and we learn about his whereabouts. It could be that protests are also taken to the place where he's kept in confinement. So, various our leadership, party leadership at the grassroots level, they're taking the initiative, they're taking the steps, to galvanize people to launch protests.
Let's bring in Palwasha Khan. She's a member of the ruling Pakistan People's Party and a member of the National Assembly, and she joins us now from Islamabad via Skype. Good to have you with us, Palwasha. Perhaps you can shed some light for us on why Imran Khan has been arrested today.
Well, he has a number of cases registered against him. This is one of those cases where he did not have a pre-arrest bail. This is an arrest by the National Accountability Bureau, as far as I know so far. And the National Accountability Bureau has its own standard operating procedures with regards to arrests. But please keep in, I'd like to highlight the issue that the current government has already passed a law that makes the laws that govern the National Accountability Bureau far less harsher than they were during Imran Khan's time, when a number of the opposition leaders and
I feel like we're slightly going off topic here. What I'm trying to understand is Imran Khan was in court. He was facing trial for one of the cases that has been brought against him. So why do these paramilitary forces storm the courtroom and pull him out to put him behind bars when he was working through the process of justice anyway?
That is another case. So, see, I'm not sure if the laws allow, since I said there are a number of cases. So, as far as I understand, this was totally another case in which he did not have bail. And the paramilitary force reports to the Ministry of... So, it is generally under the Ministry of Interior, not under the military. So, must have sought permission from the Ministry of Interior before acting.
But what about, does it sought permission from the judge who was in that court?
Sorry?
Did it seek permission from the judge who was in that court, who was trying Imran Khan?
It's not permission from the judge who is in court, because this is not the case that was being heard in court. This was totally another case in which he had been issued several notices, and he failed to either respond or appear in person as was required, as has been the practice with everybody who has been arrested by National Accountability Bureau during his own term in power. Most of the arrests that were made in Imran's terms were under the National Accountability Bureau's Act, which was much harsher than what it is now.
Yes, we heard that point before. But Imran Khan is saying that all these cases against him are politically motivated. He says the government is determined to put him behind bars no matter what. Do you see how this action today just plays into that narrative?
No, it does not. You see, these are solid cases. There are cases of foreign funding. This is a case of huge sums of money that have been embezzled, and he fails to appear and defend himself, you see. Even if a case is politically motivated, let's for a second, agree to what he says. Isn't it supposed to be the case that you come and you defend yourself? Nobody is above the law in Pakistan. People have been held behind bars for years and forgotten about in frivolous cases.
Okay,
These
but you're saying
cases
that
are solid
he has been arrested for not appearing to defend himself. But in this particular instance, he was in court to defend himself.
You see, but I'm trying to explain to you that was another case. He has
I understand
evaded
that, but why not
courts.
let justice run its course?
Sorry?
Why not let justice run its course?
We are trying to, it has nothing to do with the government, for one. Number two, this is an independent Bureau of Accountability. It does not come under the government's jurisdiction in any case. And the third thing is that he should appear. He has failed to appear before courts. He has evaded arrest. He uses medical conditions. He uses, frivolous charges against the law enforcement, the military, the government, but he does not want to appear before a court of law. That is the question.
If you say that this has nothing to do with the government, who controls this paramilitary rangers group?
I tried to explain that to you earlier also, that the paramilitary rangers group comes under the Ministry of Interior, which is under the government of Pakistan. It's a civil ministry.
Who arrested Imran Khan?
The military. They can be asked for by the Ministry of Interior, and they're at their beck and call.
But you said it had nothing to do with the government, and yes, they were arrested by paramilitary groups who respond to the Ministry of the Interior.
Rangers can be asked to come anywhere if there is a law and order situation. That is the purview of the Ministry of Interior. The case has nothing to do with the Pakistani government of Pakistan. It has to do with the National Accountability Bureau, where he has failed to appear on a number of occasions. And in the past, such leniency was not shown to his own opponents.
Do you fear for the impact that this is going to have on Pakistan? We're already seeing his supporters taking to the street. This is going to cause huge upheaval and divisions in the country.
You see, Imran Khan has been driving divisions since about a year now. And you have seen, as have all the others and the people of Pakistan, that the numbers that come out with him in case of a call for protest are not that great. So let's see. It has nothing to do with how the National Accountability Bureau operates, but he will definitely try and get his people out. But in the past, even a few days ago, there was a call, and that failed miserably. So let's see how many people come out on the streets.
Well, we are already seeing live pictures of people out on the streets protesting. So, Pal Washa Khan, we will keep a very close eye on the situation there in Pakistan. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, Palestinians are in mourning as they hold funerals for at least 13 people who were killed in overnight raids by Israel in the Gaza Strip. 40 military planes were sent to carry out a series of airstrikes. 3 of the dead are leaders in Al-Quds Brigades, the paramilitary wing of the Islamic Jihad group. The Palestinian Health Ministry says women and children were also killed. Yumna El Said has more from Gaza.
We're here now in Gaza City at Al Omari Mosque, where the funeral of the 2 commanders of Islamic Jihad who were assassinated in their apartment in Gaza City, Jihad and Khalil al-Bahtani, are being taken to the cemetery. Hundreds of Palestinians have come to escort the bodies to the cemetery, while Tariq Azzuddin, the 3rd Islamic Jihad commander, is being buried in Rafah, the southern Gaza Strip, where he was assassinated in his home as well. Now, as you can see, all these Palestinian masses are escorting the bodies to the cemeteries. And as the latest by the Ministry of Health, 13 people were killed, including the 13 Islamic commanders, 4 children and 6 women, while at least 20 others were wounded critically. The Palestinian factions have vowed for a rapid and instant response and said that the Israeli occupation will pay the price for this heinous crime. Now, these Islamic Jihad leaders have been killed in their residential homes in attack that was carried by a suicidal Israeli drone in their apartments. Yumna Syed, Gaza City.
Let's now speak to Mohammed Jamju. He's in West Jerusalem for us. And Mohammed, what are we hearing from the Israeli side following these attacks?
Well, Laura, there's been a lot of developments the past few hours. The latest that we've heard is that Israeli media is reporting that Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has informed mayors and societal leaders in the south of Israel that this conflict could potentially last for several days, and that he has okayed the Israeli army to call up reservists, essentially anticipating that this could lead to wider escalation. Now, earlier we'd heard that there was a situational meeting that was going on, that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had been in attendance along with other security officials. We also know that there is going to be a meeting of security officials and cabinet members a little bit later, within 3 to 4 hours from now. And we've also learned that later this evening, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is planning to hold a press conference where he will give more detail about this operation. Clearly right now, a lot of worry about what exactly is going to happen and what is going to happen next. Israeli officials have told Israeli media that basically what happens next is going to be up to Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and as far as how they retaliate, how they plan to retaliate in the coming days or the coming hours, and that is what's going to decide what Israel's response will be thereafter. Laura?
And how are Israelis being warned to prepare for possible retaliation from Gaza?
So right now, we know that in southern towns on the border with Gaza, that schools have been closed, that residents have been asked either to stay in their homes or to get to shelters or stay close to fortified areas, because there is so much worry that there will be rocket fire launched from Gaza toward potentially southern Israeli towns. This really just goes to show how much people have been surprised by what happened today. What's interesting is, while there is a lot of surprise that this operation was carried out by Israel in the overnight hours, targeting leadership figures in Islamic Jihad, we've learned now through Israeli media that apparently this operation was quite a while in the making. The spokesperson for Israel's army essentially saying that this had been planned potentially for weeks in advance, and that it was in response to previous occasions when rocket fire had emanated from Gaza towards Israel. Laura?
Okay. Mohammed Jarjoum joining us there from West Jerusalem. Thanks very much, Mohammed. Well, the Israeli military is also continuing with its near-daily raids in the occupied West Bank. Israeli special forces entered the old city of Nablus at around 7 a.m. local time. Palestinian youths threw stones. Soldiers responded with live gunfire. The Israeli military was reportedly targeting Palestinians suspected of carrying out a drive-by shooting in March, in which 2 Israeli soldiers were wounded. The Committee to Protect Journalists says no one has been held accountable for the deaths of journalists killed by Israeli military fire. It calls the shooting of Al Jazeera correspondent Shireen Abu Akleh a year ago part of a deadly, decades-long pattern. In a new report, the Press Freedom Organization says Israeli forces have killed 20 reporters in the last 22 years. And despite numerous internal investigations, no one has ever been charged. The conflict in Ukraine is overshadowing celebrations marking the day Soviet forces defeated Nazi Germany in 1945. 10,000 troops marched through Red Square. Russian President Vladimir Putin attended the parade along with 6 leaders from former Soviet bloc countries. Putin said Ukrainians are being held hostage to Western ambitions. He also accused the West of trying to destroy Russia.
We are seeing blatant revanchism of those who were cynically and openly preparing a new conquest against Russia. Those who assembled evil neo-Nazis from across the globe. Their goal, and there's nothing new here, is to break up and destroy our country, erase the results of World War II, and completely break the system of global security and international law.
China has expelled Canada's top diplomat in Shanghai in what it's calling a countermeasure. Earlier on Monday, Canada expelled a Chinese diplomat accused of intimidating a Canadian politician of Chinese origin. The diplomat gathered information on Michael Chong and his relatives in Hong Kong. That's according to Canada's spy agency. Chong had been critical of Beijing's treatment of Uyghur Muslims. Let's bring in Andrew KP Leung. He's an independent China strategist and joins us now from Hong Kong. First of all, what's your reaction to this tit-for-tat expulsion between Canada and China?
Well, the United States is locked in mortal combat with China, which is perceived to be America's greatest existential threat, a threat to Americans' leadership of a liberal world order and American hegemony. And it's pushing back on China 360 degrees, including the military, including all Taiwan, including Xinjiang, including Hong Kong, and also sanctions and tariffs and denying access to semiconductors, you name it. America's in it. And so there is no holds bar barring a hot war. And Canada,
it's not really about that, though, is it? Because it's more about this Canadian politician of Chinese origins being targeted, his family being targeted for his criticism of treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang.
Well, because this Canadian diplomat is sort of flag painting the Uyghur problem as if it is a kind of existential genocide, which is entirely not true. And this is a slap in by expelling this Chinese diplomat from Canada. It's a slap in the face of China. China, of course, is a much, much bigger country than Canada. And of course, China would not take it face down. And so this tit-for-tat is obviously a retaliation against Canada's diplomatic aggression.
OK, I mean, I just want to pick up on something that you said there, that the situation in Xinjiang with the Uyghurs is not a genocide, but this is something that the US, that Canada, that the Netherlands, Britain and France and others have all agreed that it is. So does that mean that anyone in those countries could be a target for China if they call it this?
Well, Xinjiang, of course, internal problems of every country must take into account that particular country's security. Xinjiang is a huge province infested by separatism for a long, long time, driven by the East Turkestan independence movement. And it's rattling the stability of Xinjiang for a long, long time until these countermeasures are put in place.
Sorry, just to interrupt again, because that is the view of China, and this isn't an interview particularly about the situation in Xinjiang, so I want to just sort of try and keep it a little bit on track. Obviously, the two sides have got different views on how to view the situation in Xinjiang with regards to the treatment of Uyghurs. But I guess the question is, if someone or a country does not agree with China's view, does it become a target for the Chinese government? And does their family become a target who might be in China?
Well, I think that this accusation that a family becomes a target has not been proven, but nevertheless, it's about not so much the target, it's the expulsion of the Chinese diplomat from Canada. It's a huge diplomatic slap in the face. And China, of course, has got to respond, particularly when such a expulsion is based on less than the true story about Xinjiang, which is, of course, very sensitive national security issue for China. That's not... in other words, I mean, to borrow an example, if I'm intervening in how you run your own family, how to treat your daughters and children and grandchildren, how would you feel, even though your treatment of them, in your view, is perfectly legitimate? So I think that countries should respect each other's internal security. And China's reaction is no more than a response to the Canadian initiative to expel this diplomat. And as I said, Canada is very, very close ally with the United States, and the United States is locked in mortal combat with China. So China seeing this as part of this no holds bar pushback against China.
Andrew KP Leung, good to get your views. Thanks very much for joining us there from Hong Kong. Now, protesters have marched against gun violence in Serbia's capital, Belgrade, following 2 mass shootings last week. The 2 incidents, including an attack at a primary school by a 13-year-old boy, has stunned the nation. The protesters are demanding the resignation of government ministers and for the media to stop hosting convicted war criminals and other criminal figures. More details are emerging about the man who killed 8 people near a shopping mall in Allen in Texas on Saturday. 33-year-old Mauricio Garcia shared white supremacist beliefs on social media. He was discharged from the U.S. Army less than 3 months after joining. Garcia was shot dead by police after he opened fire in a car park. A Senegalese court has handed a leading opposition figure a 6-month suspended sentence that could jeopardise his run for president next year. Ousmane Sonko has lost his appeal over a defamation case in Dakar. He was already given a 2-month suspended sentence and a hefty fine in March for defaming the tourism minister. Sonko was not in court for the ruling after warning that he feared for his safety. More than 400 people have been killed in devastating floods and landslides in Democratic Republic of Congo. Emergency crews continue to search for people in the worst-hit province of South Kivu. Now, onto a daring helicopter rescue in southeast Kenya, where a truck driver trapped in floodwaters was saved by 2 pilots. A flash flood flipped a fuel tanker onto its side, trapping the driver for several hours. Pilots for a nearby wildlife conservancy were called in to attempt to rescue. A helicopter hovering just 6 inches above the tanker finally managed to lift out the driver. That's it from me, Laura Kyle. Plenty more on our website, aljazeera.com. Do stay tuned for Inside Story next.
Great to have you along. Let's go with your world weather update beginning in Asia Pacific. We'll start with the good stuff first. Not much going on for the main island, Japan's main island of Honshu. Plenty of sunshine, bit of cloud cover for Hokkaido that could generate a few showers as well. We've got to talk about all the wet weather right now in China, pretty much stretching from the Yellow River Valley down to the Pearl River Valley, but the most intense stuff along the Pearl River Valley sweeping into Guangxi province in China. So Guilin, a wet day for you with a high of 21 degrees. Off to India. I got to point out this disturbance in the Bay of Bengal could certainly turn into something tropical, but it's feeding a lot of rain through the Maldives and Sri Lanka. A lot of humidity around it as well. So with that breeze off the Bay of Bengal, we've got heat wave alerts in play for West Bengal State as those temperatures, for example, in Kolkata cross 40 degrees. Also seeing that pre-monsoon heat build in a big way through Pakistan, so Nuwabsha at 42 degrees and Jacobabad in Sindh province also surpassing that 40-degree temperature. Herat, you're closing in on a temperature record for the month of May. And through the Gulf, a bit breezy at times, including for us here in Doha. You'll max out at 36 on Wednesday. See you later.
For some, a robot is a mechanical arm, or even that self-driving train at the airport. But androids today can be eerily humanoid.
Robots like me will be everywhere.
Al Jazeera Documentaries lifts the lid on the weird and wonderful world of robots that learn, think, feel, and even trust.
I feel like I'm alive, but I know I am a machine.
Origin of the Species on Al Jazeera.
After 12 years of civil war and government crackdowns, the Arab League has reinstated Syria, but some countries have expressed reservations. So does this end Bashar al-Assad's regional isolation? And what's next for Syria and its people? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Foliba Thibault. Syria has been excluded from the Arab League for more than a decade. Now, Bashar al-Assad and his regime have been welcomed back. The move points to warming ties between Syria and many of its regional neighbours. But critics say calls for accountability over the country's civil war are now fading. We'll look into this with our guests in just a few minutes, but first this report from Katia Lopez-Horoyan.
It's a move that could mark a new chapter for Syria's president. 12 years after being pushed out of the Arab League, Bashar al-Assad and his regime are now back in the fold.
From this point, Syria is a full member of the Arab League. If the country wishes, it can occupy any seat. That includes next week's Arab summit in Saudi Arabia. If President Bashar al-Assad wishes to participate, he can do so.
Syria was suspended after its government cracked down on a popular uprising in 2011 that led to its civil war. More than 500,000 people have since been killed. Millions have fled. Some neighboring countries like Lebanon and Jordan have struggled to cope with the refugees. With lack of support in the region, Assad turned to Iran and Russia, and with their help, he regained control of Syria.
This visit by Iran's president to Damascus has special importance in regards to international shifts and what they mean for regional shifts.
Syria's war has created a humanitarian crisis and led to Western powers imposing sanctions. Supporters of its return to the Arab League say it will strengthen security and stability in the region and can stop other countries from expanding their influence. But critics say Syria doesn't deserve to be readmitted.
This is a sad day for anyone who cares about democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. This is rehabilitation, one of the most brutal regimes. And this will not really bring more peace and stability to Syria. On the contrary, probably this will be very destabilizing.
The Arab League says reinstating Syria marks the start of a positive process that will help solve the country's long-standing crisis and its effects across the region. Katia Lopez-Horoyan for Inside Story.
Well, let's bring in our guests now for today's Inside Story. In Washington, D.C. is Omar al-Shogri, a Syrian refugee, now Director for Detainees Affairs at the Syrian Emergency Task Force. Joshua Landis is the Director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. He joins us from there. And in Milton Keynes is Amar Wakaf, Director of Gnosos, a Middle East think tank and a member of the British Syrian Society. A warm welcome to you all, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Omar, in Washington, D.C., let me start with you and ask you about your reaction as someone who suffered at the hands of the Syrian regime. You were in detention for 3 years. What does Syria being readmitted to the Arab League mean to you?
Firstly, as an Arab, I would find it very difficult to believe that the Arab League exists to support the Arab populations, but rather to support the Arab rulers and leading politicians. Now, as a Syrian, despite the fact that I don't believe and I could not see the Arab League as an ally of the Syrian people, I still cannot but feel disappointed and betrayed because at least, you can always see the Arab rulers or the Arab governments talk about morality and brotherhood and generosity, courage. And now when it comes to actions, they always support the evil.
Amar, let me ask you for your thoughts. Omar says he feels disappointed and betrayed. What are your thoughts about this decision to readmit Bashar al-Assad's regime? And how does this benefit Syria and the Arab region?
Well, first of all, this is like a pragmatic move, so to speak. If the Arab states, or at least certain Arab states, have tried to topple the government in Damascus, they failed. They must have a different way. It happened in Yemen as well. They must sit and negotiate. They must readmit. The days for dreaming about, getting rid of Assad, I think, are over. Everybody realizes that. So the only course of action is just to sit and try to talk with him and try to seek his help him help them, solve whatever problems they might have in the region. As for the Syrian people, I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel, finally. The largest factor of people getting out of Syria at this moment in time, which is affecting all neighboring countries, so to speak, let alone Europe, is the bad economic situation that is aggravated by the sanctions. And people in Syria believe that, once you warm up relations with the Arab world, then probably things are going to get better, at least on the economical side, which would stabilize the situation inside Syria and bring them a little bit more stability on all sides.
All right, Joshua Landis, let me ask you for your thoughts. And before I'll get back to Omar, who seems to disagree with you, Amar. Amar says that this is a pragmatic move. The regional calculus certainly seems to have shifted. What do you think is driving this need to rehabilitate Bashar al-Assad?
Well, I don't think anybody's interested in rehabilitating Bashar al-Assad. But when we think of the 16 million people, Syrians, who have been left behind, and are suffering terribly from civil war, sanctions, and poverty. 90% of Syrians are living below the poverty line. Sanctions are not working. Freezing Assad, the regime, out is not working. It hasn't hurt Assad. This doesn't bring justice to Assad. This brings injustice to the Syrians. And I think the Arab regimes have seen it that way. You can choose your friends, but you can't choose your neighbors. And they have many outstanding issues that they want to get solved. Things such as the Captagon trade, the return of refugees, trying to decrease Iran's and Russia's influence in the region, trying to get occupying powers like Turkey and the United States out of Syria and return sovereignty to Syria. All of those issues can't be addressed unless they're dealing with the government. And that's, I think that's the bottom line, that they want to deal with the government. They see the suffering of the Syrians, as we saw with the earthquake, and they believe that that's the only way forward because sanctions have failed. And the U.S. doesn't have a policy to bring Assad to justice. If it did, I think they would pursue it. And that's why this has gone on for so many years, the sanctions, without any real pushback.
All right, Omar, your response to this. Amar says that this is the light at the end of the tunnel for Syrians. Joshua says that freezing the regime hasn't really worked and that dealing with the government is the only way forward. What do you say to that?
What I would say is that the Syrian regime has killed hundreds of thousands of people, displaced millions, and, imprisoned so many. And now these people are still under torture. There is over 130,000 people being tortured on a daily basis. You cannot talk about a political solution or a solution for the people on the ground and a way for the refugees to return back if you're keeping the same reason for the refuge in place, which is the Syrian government. The Syrian regime did not change any of its behaviors. So you cannot go and negotiate with any regime that's not willing to change anything. The Syrian regime didn't even apologize for the statements that it made against the Arab governments for many years, calling them the exporters of terrorists and the half men and the trash and so on. The Syrian regime is not willing to negotiate. And by welcoming the Syrian regime back, you're telling the Syrian regime that you can kill your way to power. You're telling every Arab ruler that you actually can kill, rape, and torture your citizens one by one, and you will still be welcome back. The only way for the solution is the accountability of the Syrian regime. And let me touch base on the question of sanctions. You understand the impact of sanctions when you remove them. If you remove the sanctions, you're giving so many ways for the regime to fund its death machines. That's our biggest problem with the Syrian regime. It has the power to kill people. And if we lift these sanctions, the regime will have so